Good morning. Today's topic, which has come up on several platforms and sites that I'm affiliated to, and that's why I've selected to address it, is the concept of forgiveness. People are asking how to forgive and whether it's even necessary. It's a very complex topic, of course, because it's dependent, first of all, on your religious affiliations, and it is dependent on your belief systems and your dogmas and doctrines that are very much a part of the way in which you would manage your life decisions. I think what we can all agree on, though, is I do believe it's ascribed to Socrates as having said that when we don't forgive somebody, it's very much like drinking poison and hoping that the other person dies. What we can agree with is that those sensations, those emotions, those thoughts that are bitter and angry and leave us very much trapped, irrespective of what the issue is, what the sequence of events are that have led you to find yourself in this position. Those are the emotions that you will experience. And these emotions keep us very much in the victim mentality. Poor me, why did this happen to me? Why is my life so tough? Why is life so unfair? And that's not a position that can move us forward into any form of healing or into any, I call it secondary gain. The secondary gain from an experience in which we feel that we need to forgive the other, is where we can acknowledge, I would not have become who I am today if not for that experience. I would not have become as capable as I am. I would not have included certain people in my life whom I now value had it not been for that experience. I would not have gained the wisdom or the insight or the compassion. These are what I call secondary gain qualities from a negative experience. However, in order to get to those secondary gain experiences, it can be a very short process or it can take years. What I have found a useful tool, and it's simply a tool, is to ask this question, to ask, what is the alternative? Or perhaps even in retrospect, through a process of introspection, what would the alternative have been? And if you like, you can replay sequence of events from the point of betrayal where you find yourself now. I'm just using betrayal as an example because it's very often one of the foundational emotions in a situation where we feel we need to forgive the other. Tracing back to key points, to pivotal moments, and perhaps these pivotal moments have been building for years, perhaps even a decade. And so tracing back to key or pivotal moments that led up to the ultimate betrayal and asking yourself, what would the alternative have been in that moment had I known better? And realizing that I didn't, or clearly I would have done differently, but had I known better, what could an alternative have been? An alternative reaction, an alternative conversation, an alternative behavior. Taking it upon myself, because that is the only place where you can start. If you choose to heal, to insist that the other person acknowledges their so-called wrongdoing, to wait for retribution, to be vindictive, to be critical and judgmental and blaming the other, you are remaining stuck. That is just as simple as it is. So the only place where I can start my healing is to question myself. And in that moment when I come to the realization that there was in fact an alternative, I may not have been aware of that alternative at that point. However, when I do realize that there was an alternative, in that moment there is such tremendous growth Sure, there is nothing I can do about the current situation. The current situation is my reality. However, I can already start to prepare myself for future situations. I can already start to integrate those possibilities, those alternative realities or alternative reactions into a set of skills so that if and when a similar situation occurs, I have more tools in my toolkit. I have more choice. I have a greater ability to deal with this than what I did before. So this question for me has been very, very powerful, and I will repeat it several times. What is the alternative right now? Right now, in my reality, what are my choices? My choices are to remain stuck, to remain ruled by my own emotions, to remain where I am, or to move forward. If I choose to move forward, how can I perceive this differently? How can I become more accountable for my own space, for my own mental well-being, for my own circumstances? Taking the personal responsibility to rectify your life, irrespective of how you got there, is so extremely powerful. In that moment, you take your power back. In that moment, you become the victor, the champion. And so with what I have right now, with the alternatives that I have right now, what would be best for me? Don't place your energies into punishing the other, hoping that the other will suffer, because oftentimes they are not even aware of the situation that they've created. And if they are, they have their own opinions and their own perspectives and their own sludge that they need to be dealing with. If you are unable to manage your sludge, you're certainly not capable of dealing with somebody else's. So forgiveness is this process that happens within you. And forgiveness is absolutely not about rectifying the events, altering the circumstances, altering your reality, or altering the behavior or the thought patterns of the other. Forgiveness is about an amazing, amazing opportunity to ask yourself some introspective questions, to ask yourself, what do I want that I have control over, excluding the other from the equation? Where do I want to go to from here? Creating what I call, or it actually has been attributed to Dr. Joe Dispenza, the terminology, a future memory, a memory that I can look back on that hasn't yet occurred. It's still going to happen in the future. But if I reflect back on it now, so it's a bit of a imagination mind game, I don't have control over the fact that this person is going to be in or out of my reality. What I do have control over is my capabilities, my skill set, my circumstances, my finances, whatever they may be. So if I create a future memory based only on what I have, what is that future memory going to look like? And we really only find ourselves sufficiently motivated to deal with these questions when we find ourselves in positions of pain or hurt or angst of some sort. And so it's an exciting time. And so it's a beautiful opportunity for self-growth. So that particular question, what would the alternatives have been had I known about them, provides me with insight into my own character and into my own growth and into what I've already learned or become aware of. And then asking the same question, what are my alternatives right now, provides me with a way forward, provides me with a future that I can create. It's a simple question, and it's one question only, but I have found it to be tremendously liberating. It sets you free to take the full responsibility, not for the event, but for your current reality, onto yourself. And one of the ways that I found useful with doing that was asking the question, so, right now, what are my alternatives? Right now, do I dwell in replaying this movie over and over again in my head, where I'm the star of the show, and this is how I ought to have, or should have, or could have, or would have, or want to? It's wasted time. It's wasted energy. Create yourself in the movie in your head, the star of your show, in a future memory, with the person present, excluding that person entirely. Because if that person steps back into your life and you allow it, it can only add value. However, without them, you're still going to be okay, because you've still created a future that is solid and firm and strong and successful for yourself, that nobody can take away from you. Sometimes betrayal has occurred because we've relied too much on the other. And that's a conversation for a different day, because that's quite an in-depth conversation as to how much of our space do we own and how much of our space do we need to allocate to the other in order to enrich our lives. That's a discussion for another day. Ultimately, as your level of consciousness develops, the ultimate point of forgiveness, and I'm excluding all religious contexts from this, because forgiveness is not necessarily a dogma or a doctrine or a religious philosophy. It's a golden thread that runs through history. It's a golden thread that runs through every single culture, belief system. It is a golden thread of truth. So if we pull that golden thread out of the woven blanket, if the woven blanket metaphorically represents your culture, your religion, your gender, the circumstances itself, pull the golden thread of forgiveness out and analyze it for what it is. And the golden thread of forgiveness is to set the captive free, to liberate yourself, in the words of Bob Marley, from mental slavery. When you're living in unforgiveness, you're living as a slave to yourself. How utterly bizarre. How utterly bizarre that you yourself are both the slave owner and the slave. Why would you not set yourself free? And so when we pull that golden thread of forgiveness out of the blanket and we analyze it for what it is ultimately is setting yourself free. How do we do that? How do we do that? For me, personally, what aided my process was the question, what is my alternative? And ultimately, we do come to a point, when you do the work, when you are prepared to do the introspection, to exclude blame, judgment, and retelling a story. We've all got a story. Everybody's got a story. The retelling of your story to gain sympathy, to gain support, doesn't move you from point A to point B whatsoever. The retelling of your story might gain you momentary sympathy, and that is all it will gain you. You will still be trapped, slave to your own emotions, slave to your own thoughts. I digress. Ultimately, if you do the work, you will reach the point where you can say, thank you for that experience. And when you can truly say, without attributing the secondary gain that I mentioned earlier, oh, I'm grateful that I had this experience because I've become more compassionate or more insightful, or because I got a new job, or because I got a new set of friends. Those are all your secondary gain. When you can truly sit back and just say, thank you for this experience. I am so glad that I had it. I'm so glad that I was able to self-analyze, that I was able to grow. Thank you for this experience. In that moment, we've taken ourselves to a very special place, to a place of absolute peace and contentment that is not contingent on circumstances or other people or events, but is that it is purely a state of being within yourself. Will that come and go? Absolutely. But the more regularly you can place yourself there, the easier it is to find that space, time and time again. Because life will happen. Life will continue to happen. Life is cyclical. Good times come and good times go, and challenges come and challenges go. And the more speedily you can get yourself back to that point of a state of being of contentment, irrespective of circumstances, the less you will suffer. And so ultimately we do reach that point. And then we aspire to maintaining that state of being. And so if my sharing has in any way assisted or in any way given you a tool to deal with whatever it is that you might be going through, then I'm honored. Fiona D'Souza, Shekhinah Wellness.